Thank you, Katie. And thank you for letting the cat out of the bag and admitting that I have that dreaded title of head of placemaking, which we had laughed a lot this morning. And rather than apologize for it this afternoon, I'm trying to explain what we've been trying to do in Ebbsfleet and trying to define what placemaking actually means and how we're trying to do it in our context. We're not saying we did it right. Really what we're going to try and share with you, Mark and I, is the journey that we've been on over the last couple of years of trying to understand how you can make a place in what is the first officially designated new town for 50 years since Milton Keynes, the first officially designated garden city for 100 years, and indeed the first new town in Kent. To put it in context, if you remember back to Alistair's map, we were just before you got to London, 2 stations up the line from Folkestone. We're 17 minutes from central London by the new high-speed line. And this image gives you a sense of the kind of geography that we're in. Very much a post-industrial landscape of chalk cliffs and gorges and clefts. You can see the Queen Elizabeth Bridge crossing over the Thames very near to us, which is actually the M25 with lots of traffic and noise. But you can imagine in this very romantic image that it's a very nice place to be, albeit there isn't any people in it yet and there aren't any homes in it yet. But that gives us the context of trying to deliver this new garden city, this new town, probably the first in a completely brownfield site. The new town is also not new insofar as it's between 2 existing towns of Dartford and Gravesham, and very much embedded within existing communities, particularly Gravesham and Northfleet. As Katie said, there's quite a challenge, not least because we don't own any of the land. So High Speed 1 and the station's been open for 15 years and nothing was built there. Why not? In such a, you would think, prime position. There are many, many issues about infrastructure delivery. It's very difficult to deliver a new town in today's context. All the land is privately owned. It's very difficult to try and do land value capture, even though we've all very romantically loved to see that when you don't own the land. However, the government is spending 300 million to try and release that infrastructure and build a place. And again, we're going to share the journey for that. So I'm a bit of a self-confessed Newtown nerd, Garden City fanatic, and much of that's come from my growing up in Craigavon, Newtown, which was the bottom right of Katie's image earlier today. Usually fights with Cumbernauld to be the crappest town in the Crap Town publications most years. Interestingly, had the same architect, Geoffrey Copcutt, but even Geoffrey Copcutt resigned from Craigavon 3 years into its delivery. And this is the kind of imagery we had as growing up in this new place. Kind of exciting. These fabulous bridges going to nowhere and these motorways that none of us actually own cars. I usually describe Craigavon as, can you imagine Milton Keynes with no jobs and no money and nobody managing the green space? So all that 40–50% of the green space actually became barriers. The image on the far left is my paper round. It was probably the most daunting and healthy paper round in the country because it was so far between all the houses and between all the estates, particularly as 40% of the housing was demolished within 15 years. So I guess the culmination of this place and the lesson that I'm taking forward, it was then designated a European Poverty-Free Programme. So the only place in the UK ever to have that accolade as the most socially excluded place in Europe. So again, the real lesson to take from this is new towns can get very wrong, but you can also get it very right. And my obsession with new towns since that is how can I make sure I can make people understand that they're leaving legacies like this. There's 15,000 people live in that. It's not a joke. It is a really serious place. Has the worst mental health issues in Northern Ireland currently. Which brought us on to our new point is Ebbsfleet Garden City. We're also the first or the largest of the Healthy New Town pilots. And this is a program set up by NHS England. And it was very much the start of our journey as what's a garden city? Because quite frankly, the government's using that band without actually understanding very much what it means. Katie and our colleagues at TCPA have been pushing and trying to make sure we understand garden city principles. And I'm very much trying to take that as part of my role to embed it in our work moving forward. But being a healthy new town has really helped us because when the NHS was set up 70 years ago, the Minister for Health was the Minister for Housing. And there was a real understanding about the connections between place and health, the quality of the environment you're living in and the quality of the life that you lead in that place. And we very much at Ebbsfleet, to sort of start our journey, used arts and culture and creativity to try and help us understand that. Colleagues at Kent County Council, people like Mark, who's going to talk in a second, and Whitstable Biennale have been really helpful to try and make us use arts and creativity to think through what a new garden city should be. So, for example, what's the new model of care for a new garden city? Working with the NHS and the local CCG, we had a sort of design charrette, 2 days long, 250 people. What do you want health to be in your place? What came out of that was people telling us they wanted well-being, they wanted social prescription, they wanted to have arts and culture, they wanted to have things to do. Stick some GPs upstairs if you want, but that's the end of the journey, not the beginning of the journey. So arts and culture have been really great in helping us think through elements like this. The NHS actually funded an international design competition to design that landscape. So if you think of that image I showed you at the beginning, most of its barriers at the minute. Our existing communities have 90% less green space than the national average. So not surprising they've got the worst obesity for kids at age 11. So through our international design competition, we've come up with a sort of arts project where landscape architects, arts engineers, and architects have tried to give us a vision of what that garden city could be. This is a derelict quarry that's closed off to the public currently, and this is a vision for what it might be in the future. Not exactly like that, but it's really important from the beginning to use arts and creativity to raise our ambitions and aspirations for the place. But as Walt Disney said, you can dream, create, design, and build the most wonderful place in the world, but it requires people to make it a reality. So in our Healthy New Town program and all our work in placemaking at Ebbsfleet, we really understand that it's people that's going to make the place. The development corporation might last 10 years, 20 years, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's the people who are going to be there for the long term that we really need to work with. So we have been using a lot of different activities, asking people what they want, what would help them be the ideal place for them to live in Ebbsfleet. We've had events, we've had activities, we've brought artists in to help us understand that. And rather than me trying to explain that, I thought I'll just show you a film of some of the things that local people have told us.
Today we're here at Manor Community Primary School in Swanscombe for The Gathering. It's the culmination of the Healthy Newtown project.
Today's a celebration of community, all things joyous, artistic and health-based. So it's a bringing together of the local community to share joy, health, happiness.
It's also about creating an identity for this place, the new garden city, that actually things happen here, really exciting and fun things happen here for people that already live here and for people that might want to move here as well.
There has been badge making, there's printing, there's been performances by some of the local kids and community groups. There's been a laughter queen, just make sure everyone's just sharing laughter. That's a beautiful thing.
We're doing a giant collage. It's like a vision board, so you put affirmations and positive things on it. And you've got babies in pushchairs that have stuck things on ours to 10-year-old boys that say, oh, I'll do it. All right, then I'll find a bike and put it on it. And it's like overwhelming. All cultures is fantastic.
I think it's amazing. I think it's really positive, especially for people that are new in the area, that have come from different parts of London, Essex or surrounding counties. I think it's really good for mums to get to know each other and to get involved in the community. And I think it's really good for children.
This is an amazing event. I think it's the first time that the communities are properly connected. Yeah, and through something fun and simple, isn't it? And it shows them that you can do all sorts of things with not a lot of stuff.
Getting up on stage and doing a bit of performance, challenging yourself and sharing that with everyone around you is incredibly important.
Art is to me inherently like therapeutic.
You're meeting people, you're connecting with people, you're connecting with nature.
And we're asking people all the time, including through this film, what do you want, what do you feel, how are we doing this right, what would you like to see as well as that in the future?
My oldest boy had Santa bring to him running kit, so I think yes, it's there.
Part of our job as the Development Corporation is to facilitate the building of the place in a way that's going to support future activity. It's almost like developing a lifestyle, I guess, that people will find attractive and appealing.
This project was started off with an idea and grabbed together people and then say, what do you think? Do you think this could work?
Sorry, that was just to give you a sense of what local people are saying and telling us. What was great, however, was that all of that activity was paid for by the NHS. There is no money invested in a development corporation set up today that allows you to spend money on placemaking or investing in people or community infrastructure. By testing it through the Healthy New Town, it's really raised that as an issue, the importance of stewardship of place, of people. We're now going through the basis of having a new spending review bid. And bearing in mind we're the first of a new generation of garden communities, it's really important to make the point that placemaking, quality of place and quality of life has to be part of building new communities, and that we have to put money into stewardship and we have to put money in community facilitation. So the work I've been doing with Mark, which he's going to come on to, is really much taking you through that process, putting arts and culture at the centre of our new strategy and making sure that our vision for the place responds both to what people are telling us, understands the work and the lessons that we've learned from other places and people like yourself, but really informs a new vision for placemaking for the future.
Thanks, Kevin. So, it's good you're clapping before I speak. Oh, it was for Kevin. Very good. Okay, look, I've just got a couple of minutes, I think, 2 or 3 minutes. Is that right? Yeah. So I think, at the end of the day, and the shorthand would be what Cara and Stephen said this morning. The slightly longer version of that is that notion that the community is the expert in their own lives, that in the end, all of this, what you just saw in the film, isn't the end of a process, it's just the very beginning. And really it's a process that talks about connecting different communities of interest and identities in the way that was described this morning. It's about encouraging the emergence of agency and voice. And in the end, it's about a process by which genuine ownership is made by different communities of interest, and partnerships are made with artists and the creative sector. But I think one of the big things we would say is that we have misgivings about some of the models used in traditional liberal arts development. The idea that you build cathedrals and then you run multi-million-pound outreach programs, I think, is bust. But it's still very much the norm. It's not appropriate to places like Ebbsfleet. It never comes to places like Ebbsfleet. So how do you do it differently? How do you really try and push forward a sense of people's own voice and agency? And so, this isn't a simple problem. This isn't even a complicated problem. It is, in what complexity theorists call it, it is genuinely a complex problem, or a wicked problem, rather deliciously described by complexity theorists. And all we're doing is, and be generous with me, I understand the complexity around the word community. It is a community-led cultural program. It's at the heart of it. So what I've just been talking to is really, how do you go about that? We've got plans for a People's Assembly next year. We've got work that's genuinely trying to transfer ownership from artistic curators and instigators. We also have brought forward, and I want to talk about that just for 1 minute, the idea of co-locating and integrating cultural facility into the master plan and into different grades of community infrastructure. And for architects and planners in the room, of course, co-location and integration isn't a new idea, but it's a relatively new idea on the scale we're talking about doing in Ebbsfleet, and I think it is a new idea in terms of the scale around arts and cultural facility. And as to the point about economic regeneration and also the transference of we're well into the 21st century, we should probably stop talking about 21st century skills, but skills that are going to be fit for purpose in 2040, 2050, it's extreme. And when you think about the kind of controls and the lack of diversity and the lack of sharing of those skills in the creative sector and the creative industry, which is on par with the banking industry in terms of its performance on diversity, then it's absolutely vital that we play our role in the transference and development of capacities and skills around narrative and storytelling and design process, and then the specific skills that can generate jobs and can be useful to people in the area. So very quickly then, I will just skim past some of these processes. When you look at a master plan of this scale, you see some amazing parks. You see, I think, 6, 7 schools, 5 community centres, all sorts of community infrastructure. And I suppose what I've tried to do, and I would say sort of what Kevin and I have tried to do is put the cat amongst the pigeons, really, in terms of this master plan. This master plan, as Alistair said in his description, didn't have culture or arts or creativity or everyday cultural habits of people represented into its original. It's an Osborne wet dream, really. And what we've done is say, actually, how can we start to really transform that from the inside? So the most important thing is genuine ownership and voice of the local pre-existing communities and the new communities coming into the area. But the other area, and there's 3 or 4 different areas, but the other area to talk to, I think, is really this idea of co-location. So obviously we've got Meanwhile and pop-up spaces. We've got pre-existing plans for facility. You know, one of my favorites is, you know, a doctor's surgery. Well, why can't we build a dance studio in a doctor's surgery? If we're building a school, why don't we build proper community facility? I was involved as special advisor to the last Labour government in Department of Education. We did a lot of work in building schools of the future. There are ways and lessons about how to make schools a part of a community and to provide community facility that can benefit children and families, but it can also benefit the wider community. So that's what our workshop is going to talk about a little bit afterwards. And wrap up. And of course, in due course, there's something I think called the 30-year rule. You might know it, Katie, that you get this kind of infrastructure after a certain period of time. What we're really saying is, can we marry the integration at neighborhood level of access to community facility and capacity with the idea of empowered voice of local communities and individuals who can start to shape that and in so doing actually shape their built environment as well as the services and the experiences that they want and that are useful to them.